Welcome back to AMS UBC Cricket Club's podcast, the Overcast podcast. We're out of the IPL season now, and it feels like we're back to the good old days before COVID, the new normal. CSK winning again, yet another trophy, five now. And Eshaan, did you watch the final?
Nah, not really. I mean, the IPL ended on the 21st of May for me. So, yeah, I'm not
Oh
really,
wow!
I wasn't very interested in the playoffs. But, anyways, let's move on to more important stuff in life, like Test
Oh
cricket.
wow!
Uh,
Okay.
we got a very important game coming up on the 7th of June. India v Australia, WTC Final. I just want to sort of get the general vibes from you. What are you feeling? Who do you think are the favorites for this Test match?
I'm very excited to be honest. Because I mean we've made yet another final, and with that comes a sense of worry, a sense of concern that here we go again. All
Yeah.
excited with all our hopes up, but this time it feels a bit more different. This time I feel a bit more secured. There's a sense of preparation, and I sense a good battle that's going to happen on the field because both sides have played very well across the WTC, and both sides have they might have inched into the final, especially India with that
Mhm.
Kane Williams run out, but they they are well deserving of this final stage and having it in England in what seems to be bowler friendly conditions. It'll be fun to watch. What are your take on it?
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a very interesting match, especially looking at how Australia's been playing their cricket over the past few months. It's pretty exciting to see how their players have come in, and I mean, seeing the best of Smith and Labuschagne. It's always very exciting, and especially when you put that in perspective in an Indian context, with Siraj coming in, with Shami coming in and attacking their best batsmen. I think it's going to be a very good contest to watch. And talking about the contest itself, we could also mention how Kohli's form has come in from the IPL, and it's going to be pretty good for us. We really need him to do well. Our batting order sort of relies on Kohli and the two openers that we have as well to sort of give them a good start. So Australia needs to bowl well, especially with Starc with the new ball and swinging in with that angle, coming in, taking the ball outside. So how do you see that battle?
I mean, I mentioned this in the previous podcast as well. Anytime we see a left armer with a new ball, I start panicking. So, yes, Dayal. No, but it's a very good battle that
Mhm.
we'll get to witness. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see much of Stark against Kohli in the Border Gavaskar Trophy, but like in this case, and these are optimal conditions for fast bowlers. So it's not anymore in like Kohli's strength per se. It he has to take the challenge on, and I think that's another thing I want to see with these key battles: Kohli and Stark, Siraj and Smith, Shami and Labuschagne, and or vice versa.
Mhm.
Like I want to see that battle being even now. Now that we are in supposedly bowler friendly conditions, but it also needs to the aggression needs to be there. What we saw in the border Gavaskar was a bit too much friendliness, a bit too much, calmness. Yes, they've played over a decade, some of them together, but that's my take on it. What do you think? Do you think that aggression will help
I
India's
think
case?
I mean, especially when Australia's involved, you don't really expect them to take any game for granted. I mean, of course, we want to see some banter going on, and we want to see Warner doing the Jadeja sports thing on the field. So yeah, looking forward to all the banter, all the sort of fun interactions we're going to have, especially between someone like a Warner and Kohli or someone Siraj, getting riled up. So it's always exciting to watch two good teams battle against each other, especially in conditions like England. I mean, I don't think there's a game which excites me more, because we haven't seen Australia v India in England, and that in itself is a story and a big talking point, because overcast conditions, of course, being the overcast podcast, we love our overcast conditions.
Yeah, definitely. And the good part, as I mentioned, and even you brought it up, was the good form of the players playing in this final. In the previous WTC final, it was a mixed bag because a lot of the players weren't in as good form. But now, Kohli with the IPL season, of course, and then Pujara, you have his stint at Sussex, and he
Mm-hmm.
played with Steve Smith, so I don't know how much intel he got from that. But Labuschagne as well playing for Glamorgan, and
Right.
Siraj in the IPL has just been relentless. Like,
Mhm.
what kind of feats do you expect these players to play in the final, or do you think there's be some kind of upset?
I think seeing Pujara bat the way he has in the county cricket is very promising for us. I think he's someone that hasn't been able to find his groove in Test cricket for the past couple of years. Of course, he's scored a couple of big scores, but again, finding that consistency for him has been a challenge. So it's really good for him to find some form in England against some quality opposition. So really good to see him going out there, not being picked up by CSK and sitting in the dugout for 2 months. So good for him to get some experience out there. But yeah, I mean, the battle is going to be very interesting. The form, like you mentioned, Siraj coming in from a very, very impressive IPL season. Kohli, of course, getting 2 centuries, middling the ball very consistently. So it's going to be good from an Indian perspective. I think we're in a stage where most of our players are looking good. I mean, our openers, of course, Rohit didn't have the best of IPL seasons, but I'm sure with ICC tournaments we know how Rohit goes. So especially with him, with Gill, who's of course in tremendous form, I think we're in for a very good test match, and I think we are favourites to win. I'm just going to say this from as unbiased as a point of view could be, but I think India going into this test match with their bowling lineup in good form, we are favourites to win this test match. But my only concern, I'm going to ask you this because what do you think about like the IPL having an impact on the players' fitness? Because players like Shami, Siraj, Kohli, of course, I mean, RCB went out pretty early, but players like Shami, who had to play the last game, yeah, Jadeja, Rahane, they had to play the last game as well. So, what do you think the impact is on their like fitness levels, and do you think there's any chance of fatigue to come in, and how will that affect the match?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because you're switching from like very fast-paced cricket to slow-paced cricket. Although they do say in test matches, within sessions game change, but
Right.
it is a game of patience. And I also feel like yes, there's going to be fatigue, but
Mhm.
the good part of playing such a high intensity tournament is your skill sets on the fundamental level are prepared. You're fielding well, you're seeing the ball well, and you generally have a good game sense. Yes, the technique will change, the shot selections might change as well, but it's about playing your game as well. And I think another thing that I looked at some of the clips of both the teams. They were practicing a lot on their catching
Mhm.
because in the IPL it's a lot of ground fielding, but catching, especially close up, is something that's very important. So the IPL definitely has an effect, but contrary to the points of a lot of people saying that, oh, they're playing the IPL, they're not well prepared for this, I
Mhm.
would like to argue the counterpoint that if you're playing in the nets and, or playing in English conditions per se, in a similar format as the WTC, you might not be as prepared as you went from the IPL because of the high stakes of the game. It's a
Right.
final, it's a WTC final, and it's
Right.
a one off test. It's not a series where you get another chance.
Mhm.
So I feel like from that perspective, the players will be prepared.
I think that's a pretty good point. And talking about IPL and doing well in the IPL and sort of that form carrying over and coping well with the pressure as well. Someone like David Warner, because we're going to see him in the middle of the action pretty frequently, because he's someone. His character is of if his character is such that he's always in the middle of the game, no matter what the situation is, no matter how his form is. And he didn't have the
Yeah.
best of IPLs, even though he got 50s consistently, but I'm sure that his team not doing well and him as captain, I'm sure that he wasn't in the best of moods throughout the IPL season. I mean, Delhi had one of the worst seasons. I mean, we've come to expect such things from Delhi, but yeah, I mean, David
Oh,
Warner, David Warner coming into this test match. How do you see him doing, because he's always found that Shami battle pretty challenging as well. We've seen him struggling against Shami, especially with the ball coming in. The late movement challenges him. So how do you see Warner playing in this test match? And because these players haven't really caught a lot of cricket. Even if you look at other players like if you look at Travis Head, you look at Pat Cummins, who's been out of the game for a long time now. So this Australia setup, I'm not sure if it's truly at the level of challenging India. But what do you think of Warner, and what do you think of players not getting enough game time before this match?
Yeah, Warner. He was a lone wolf in the DC camp.
Yeah.
He had to carry the team a lot of the time. And what I felt with Warner, especially in the Test match game, and he said this, he's tired of the game now, especially the Test match. And I I I have a hint of feeling that Australia might even risk not playing him in the final. Like they might even take that harsh call. But given how valuable he is and how he can change the game if he really gets going, he he needs to understand that his role is more paramount than a Labuschagne or a Smith. Because if Australian openers get going on the oval wicket, it will be difficult for India to make a comeback in any of the innings.
Yeah.
So, and especially the dynamic starts he gives. So, and regarding game time with Hazelwood, of course, in the RCB camp, you guys were taking good care of him. So he sat injured. But again, I feel like with Hazelwood, he's always been a threat to India, regardless of the conditions. So maybe it might deter him if he's bowling on day one, maybe with his lines and lengths. But if once he gets going, we have experienced a 36 all out. So we can't say much in that regard.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, going on, we could talk about Australia and how they've lined up for this test match, and we could talk about maybe the playing 11 that we can expect from their side. So you talked about the opening slot. It's very interesting that Warner, if they decide to rest Warner, that'll be very interesting to see, because he's a player who loves to play that big game. Loves to be out there for his country and play the big games like finals and play in big tournaments. So if they rest him, that's going to be a very bold decision. But I do expect him to open with Khwaja. I know like both are left-handers, and there's a lot of talk of center left and right opening combination. But I do expect them to open because they're pretty strong. But do you agree with Khwaja opening with Warner? Do you see someone like a Travis Head coming in? How do you see that opening pair?
I think despite like my previous point, I don't think they would risk too much. So they would open with Warner and Khwaja. And Khwaja, like without a doubt, he plays well against India. He can negate the threat of maybe the Ashwin or Jadeja. So Khwaja without a doubt. Warner, yeah, I think they'll play him, and then in the Ashes they'll figure it out later of where he comes in. But as of now, I think Warner and Khwaja is way to go. And of course, you have the fixed Labuschagne and Smith coming in at 3 and 4. I don't think so. You're changing that, because if you are, then you're giving us a massive head start in the final.
For sure, yeah, I agree with you. I think both of them find their spots very easily. But what is interesting is who comes in afterwards, because I see Travis Head as someone who can make an impact in that game, because he's had a very interesting test career so far, and I see him as a very talented player. So I think Travis Head after Smith could be an interesting pick for me.
Yeah, and Travis Head also gives a bit with the ball. Like it's quite underrated, but on the oval track, it's tend to have more turn towards the day 4, day 5. So he might even play as like an all-rounder. And I think the dynamic batting he brings, like especially if you saw Australia's home season against West Indies,
right,
he really took the game on. Like if Australia was struggling or they weren't struggling, regardless, he scored at a strike rate. There was a game at SCG against Nokia and then Rabada, a very potent South African attack. and against them he scored some 97 of 94, which was the game-changing innings.
Yeah.
So I think Travis Head definitely would be part of it, and of course I think Carey confirms his keeping position with Australia. There's some talks of Pearson, but that's again for the Ashes.
Right, right. And I think I don't really see Jimmy Pearson coming in just after some. I mean, he must have played some domestic cricket. I'm not sure. I've not really followed him, but I've just seen him in a
Yeah.
few BBL games. I'm not really sure if they're going to go for him in this big test match. And we're going to talk about selecting a few inexperienced keepers later. But yeah, for now, I think it's very interesting that you brought up that aggressive mindset that Travis Head has, because we've talked a lot about the baseball sort of culture that Test cricket has come to know of from England, and I think players like Travis Head, Alex Carey, Cameron Green, we could also talk about, because he comes in after Alex Carey for me. So these three players, that aggressive mindset, I think those are the players you need to win you Test matches, because that strike rate, I think, has become more important in Test matches, and people don't really give credit to players like them, players like Head, Carey, and Green, who can take the game away from you easily, like you mentioned. I think going to the bowling lineup, I think it's pretty obvious, pretty well set for Australia, that they're going to go with Cummins, Starc, Hazelwood as a pace trio, and Nathan Lyon as a spin option. But I just wanted to ask you, do you see Scott Boland or Michael Nisser like making an impact, finding a spot in place of someone like a Hazelwood, who hasn't really played a lot, of course, because of RCB not taking care of him?
Yeah. Yeah. I really think there's a case for Scott Boland. But again, it depends a lot on the wicket, because he might just be that like in cricket, sometimes you bring in a pinch hitter of sorts up the order that just smacks. So I feel like he's the pinch bowler on those conditions. But again, knowing Australia and knowing their lack of taking risk, they're also a very secure team in that sense. They don't take Shane Watson or Yuvraj Singh, in IPL auctions.
Right.
So, but no, I think they would go with the four with three fast bowlers, and they're some of the best bowlers in the world. So I don't think so they would change around with that. Yeah, and especially they want to see their best 11 arguably against India, so that this almost acts like a warm-up to the Ashes, because I feel like personally they care more for the Ashes. But
yeah, I guess the Indian lineup we could talk about next, because Rohit and Gill, I think, are pretty much set in that opening slot. We don't see Shikhar Dhawan in the squad. We don't see any other opener except for Eshaan Kishan that we'll talk about. But I think Gill and Rohit are pretty much set. But what do you think? What happens next? Who comes in after, of course, Pujara and Kohli?
Yeah, I think Rahane without a doubt,
Right.
because I don't think so the Indian selectors are playing that much of a game to select him after that long, only to drop him in the final.
Right.
So I think Rahane has to be number 5. It is interesting though that IPL form alone secures you a spot in the Indian team.
Yeah.
Especially in Test match. So I don't know how he'll go. And I was looking at the Nets session a bit, and all the Indian batsmen were playing some aggressive shots, pull and then stepping down the wicket. Even Pujara was doing it. So I'm like, are we sure we're at the right tournament? Are we doing baseball? Grub it ball?
We're still in that IPL fever, playing all those reverse sweeps, and I mean, I won't be surprised if we see some of those shots coming in, especially from Gill and Rohit. So it'll be pretty exciting if that sort of game comes up, and we have our own version of baseball. So it's going to be pretty interesting. But I think you mentioned something about Rahane and his form. I think people were, trolling him online because right after he got picked for the Indian team, his form in the IPL also went down. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because I think we're relying on him in the middle to sort of anchor with the tail. So, and talking about anchoring with the tail, I think we have a pretty big, important debate coming up. Who keeps for us? Who bats after Rahane? Do they go with Bharat? Do they go with KS Bharat, or do they go with Eshaan Kishan? And we put up an Instagram poll on our story asking who should they pick? And pretty surprisingly, people said that Eshaan Kishan should play in front of KS Bharat in this important game. Kishan, of course, no test cricket, no test experience behind him, but do you think that he could be the X factor? Do you think they should go for experience? I mean, what do you think on this?
I personally think they should have played MS Dhoni, but that's a personal opinion. Uh,
I'll agree with that. I'll agree
no,
with that.
but Bharat versus Kishan, I
Mm.
personally, when I first heard it, I was like, why not Saha?
Right.
Because he's a very experienced keeper, and you know, believe it or not, that batsman at number 6 is the defining moment for India. It because Pant has been doing it for so long, and now we are deciding between our two reserve keepers. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not a good situation to be in. But yeah, it's interesting. The poll said Kishan, and especially like as I see him play in the shorter formats, the technique is very susceptible to a moving ball. Like
Mm.
I would see Kishan struggle against this moving ball. Yes, he is the left-hander, which gives the added benefit. But you know, a Gaza could really rattle Ishan Kishan. Like, and the only plus side I see with Ishan Kishan is the aggressiveness,
Right.
the Rishabh Pant like cameo that he might play, and
Mm-hmm.
save India. But as we saw in the last WTC, if your batting won't work, it just won't work, no matter how many cameos Rishabh Pant will play.
Right.
So, for just experience alone and just for keeping ability and stability, I would pick KS Bharat. India have backed him for so long. He's basically been our Sidesh Lad
Mm-hmm.
in our squad, warming the benches. But so I think he deserves that much of a at least recognition that okay, you know what, you're worth playing the final. You're worth not being uh, you're worth being selected ahead of the Saha. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I think they would back KS Bharat. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I think one of the reasons why Ishan was picked was probably to continue that Rishabh Pant sort of framework and side of playing, and to probably have that aggressive option to pick. But I just don't think that's the right pick because we need some stability, like you talked about, and some sort of support for the lower middle order and to play with the tail. I just don't think Ishan Kishan has that ability or has that experience rather to play in such tough situations and to play with the back end like the tail. So yeah, I just don't think Ishan Kishan is the right option. Of course, he's a backup, but to put him in the deep end just to say play the WTC final and win us a game is just not fair on him as well. So I think
Yeah.
KS Bharat is the right pick. Of course, there's a debate for Rhythm and Saha that I think is a very fair one that you brought up, and that's a topic for another day probably. But if KS Bharat, if they've picked KS Bharat in this side, I think they should go with him for this match. But talking about the
Definitely.
lower middle order that we talked about, I think Jadeja picks himself after that final game that I said I didn't
Definitely.
watch, but pretty good, pretty good to see him as well find some form for himself. But I think
Yeah.
Jadeja is the batsman for us at number 7 because he's pretty good with the bat. But who bats after him? Do you think they play a second spinner in Ashwin, or do you think they go into the pace options after that?
Um, it's very hard for me to not pick our number one test bowler. Like
Right.
it's like yes, there's the argument of conditions, but
Mm.
if you really want to become the number one test team in the world, your test side shouldn't change as much
Right.
across the world. So, but yes, that there comes another point that if the Indian batting is brittle, does
Mm.
Akshar Patel come in?
Right.
Given his recent form, and does he play ahead of Ashwin? Because Jadeja is a must for me with the fielding he adds, even if he
Mm-hmm.
might not do anything with the battle ball.
Mm-hmm.
The fielding aspect of Jadeja is very intimidating, and that might turn games. But I personally feel we would play Ashwin and then we'll move to the seamers.
Right.
But yeah, what your take on that? Do you play Akshar based on the batting form?
I think if you play Jadeja, then you have to play either Ashwin or go into the pace, because playing Jadeja and playing Axar won't be the right option for me, because both are pretty similar bowlers, in terms of the pace that they bowl at, the sort of angle that they create, and of course they're both left armers. So if you play Jadeja and you want some sort of variation with the spin department, I think the right pick would be to go for an Ashwin who can toss the ball up, spin it away, spin it into the right handers as well. So I think Ashwin has that caliber in him, and you said he's the number one test bowler for us. So I think he's the right pick at number 8, and also he's pretty handy with the bat as well. So
Yeah.
I think he adds that depth as well. But do you see the bowling lineup in Shami Siraj and Shardul, or do you see Shami Siraj playing with Umesh Yadav? Because that's another big topic for India.
I actually have a very controversial opinion on this.
Damn.
I
Okay.
see Unadkat making into the team.
No way.
Because I just feel like India has not picked him for nothing, in my opinion. He doesn't have the pace of Mitchell Starc. No way he's there as a net bowler to practice for Kohli, right?
That's true. That's true.
I just feel like Unadkat might just do the trick on those conditions. I hope I'm wrong, because it's just a very conspiracy theory. But I hope it's not Shardul Shami Siraj, because with that I just see Shardul as a weak link. Like, we just picked him for his batting,
Right.
and that's something of a concern to me. So in the best case scenario, it is Umesh, Shami, Siraj, and hopefully all of them are fit, because Umesh does have a fitness issue as of now. Yeah, like, who are your 3 seamers for you?
That'll be very interesting if Unadkat plays. This is gonna get clipped. If Unadkat plays, I'm gonna clip this and post it, because that's a very bold call. Because he hasn't played a lot of Test cricket in such conditions and against such opposition. So if Unadkat plays, that's gonna be one Test match to watch. And he could be the X factor, like you said. But in my opinion, I think Shardul does well. We've seen him do well in those conditions, because he can move the ball around. And if he plays, then we've got a very deep batting lineup as well, because he comes in at number 9. Of course, Shami can swing a few at number 10 as well. So we've got a very deep batting lineup, and I think that's something that we have to look towards, because playing in England, playing against Australia, I think what we've seen in the past as well, we need a batting lineup that goes deep, and that players like Shardul and Shami or Ashwin can give us that extra 20, 30, 40 runs at the back. So I think that'll be the right call for me. And of course, Shami and Siraj pick themselves after their IPL and the kind of players they've come up to be in the past 2-3 years. So that's the team from my end, and I think we can both agree this team looks pretty strong. Of course, that sort of middle order in Bharat or Eshaan is the big concern for me, but I think the Indian team looks strong enough to beat Australia. What do you think?
It does, and I think it's going to be a very strong contest, and I think the contest is going to be on this team that bats better, in my opinion. Whoever bats better will win this WTC.
Right.
But in my prediction of a winner, I see Australia going over the line.
Okay.
I see them being more of a clutch team than we are. We have clutch pairs, no doubt. But they just get up, and they have that thing in them to just rise to the occasion and come up with knocks that are like unbeatable. Like, I remember Smith's comeback, 2 back-to-back hundreds in England. So they have that innate ability, whilst India has the ability to unanimously collapse. So, but I still see a very strong contest, and I'm hoping that India goes over the line. But as of now, I think Australia have a bit of an edge over India.
If only they played more cricket than golf, but that's a topic for another day. So, yeah.
The training jerseys are there. So,
right.
I mean, the training jerseys. So, but here's the thing, as I mentioned, I mean, as I say to my friends a lot, every time India changes its jersey, they lose a final. So don't
Uh,
change the jersey.
don't jinx it, man. I mean, that'll be heartbreaking if that happens again. But yeah, the jersey for the at least the Test cricket, it looks good. Of course, gives off Real Madrid vibes. But I think the jerseys look decent. The ODI kit, I'm not sure. It's just giving LSG 2022 vibes to me. So I'm not sure about that shade of blue. And I've just seen so much blue in cricket. And IPL is just filled with blue and all shades of blue. So yeah, I'm just sick of blue. What do you think?
Yeah, and I don't know. India should have maybe incorporated a bit of different colors, as you mentioned, maybe a
Right.
bit of saffron, bit of like. But well, it is what it is. The T20 jersey straight up looks like
Uh-huh.
they got a football jersey,
Right.
and then just. But I mean, it, I'm still going to end up buying it. So why am I complaining?
For sure.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I can definitely see Sunil Chhetri playing in that T20. Like I can just see him wearing that. It just fits
top
that.
order batsman. Yeah.
Proud, yeah.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much. If you have listened to the podcast until here, we know you're absolute fans of the game. Um, Please let us know in the comments. Like what other things you wanted to discuss. I know there's a lot of cricket going on.
Hmm.
If you guys want your opinions heard as well, like just feel free. Like, what's your playing 11 for the WTC? What do you guys think? You can follow us on Instagram, YouTube. You
Yes.
can watch our podcast on Spotify as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, just feel free and then approach us from Instagram. We'd be happy to respond. And yeah, hope you like this one. And yeah, please subscribe to YouTube.